All right, well, it seems to be stabilizing a little bit. So perhaps what we'll do is we'll go ahead and we'll get started. So thank you everybody for coming. Typically we have a sort of larger conference where we're able to actually be in the same room with one another and to hear what all the great things are that are being done throughout the TEPS network. But of course, this year being strange coronavirus year, we're in a different circumstance. And we've been trying to figure out the best way to adapt to that. And I think Regina did a really good job in identifying, where we really can add some value with a nice little set of seminars here today. So you're going to hear from a number of people, some of whom are graduates of this particular program, about where they are now in the working world. And I think that'll be very helpful for those of you in the program as you're heading forward with your degrees and with your professional development. So I think it's going to be a really good afternoon. I'm looking forward to the talks myself. And perhaps what I will do here, we don't want to keep this terribly formal, as you may have heard. I'll turn it over to Regina, who put all of this program together to tell us exactly what it is that we are in for today.
Thank you, John. Once again, I do apologize for the inconvenience of this workshop. In the past, we usually got together in an exotic place and including off-campus tour and everything else. And this year, because of what's going on in the world, it really had to be a very, very different format. But that doesn't mean that we will not have another opportunity to get together. I'm really hoping that at a later date, when it's nice and safe to do so, we will get together and maybe have that trip to Sudbury as a group. I do want to acknowledge help from Ahmad, who actually put this program together, as well as the 5 speakers on a very short notice offered to come and share their experience with us. I'm not going to take too much of your time. I just want to start with a quick introduction of the first speaker, Dr. Frias, who is the new postdoc of this program, but he also is here today as an experienced project manager and someone who's actually done a number of space missions. So he's here to share his experience with us. Following presentations, I guess we'll just introduce one speaker at a time, but I'm really hoping that it'll be only about 2 hours long in total, and it will be hopefully a very interactive action, whereas a lot of the Zoom meetings have been very one-sided. So I'm really hoping to see a lot of interaction from the audience today and look forward to hearing everyone on the team. Just to make sure that do we have all 5 speakers in the Zoom meeting? I can't really tell. Well, let's just assume that they are. If not, then I'm sure Ahmad will follow up with the speakers and help with the setup. So Alex, as I mentioned, is the postdoc in the program, and he finished his PhD from Ryerson a few years ago. Since that, he's been working at an industry called MSCI, who's actually an industry sponsor of this program, as well as Kazi in South Korea, working on a CubeSat mission being launched this year or next year. Currently, he's managing another CSA project with me, and he has lots and lots of experience in project management. And hopefully we hear a few tips. So Alex, all yours.
Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you, Regina, for the kind introduction. And I hope everybody is having a pleasant day so far. Just to expand on my information, so I'm currently a postdoctoral research fellow at Dr. Regina's lab under the TEPS grant. And I'm working with her on a CSA project detecting RSOs in space. And I'm currently the lead systems engineer for that project. So for today's talk, I'd like to share with you my experience on what I have done in Korea last year. So I'd like to get to that. So I'm just going to share my screen. Great. So for today's talk, I'm going to be highlighting on the CASI SNIPE mission. It's a real mission that's going to be launched in upcoming years. And this is, it's from the Korea Astronomy and Space Science Institute in Korea, where I did a fellowship. So I would like to share today my experience on the systems engineering side of the site mission. I wasn't directly the lead systems engineer for the mission. I was an assistant, and I was also the ACS engineer for this particular mission. So my agenda for today is I'm just going to go over the mission overview of the SNIPE, the team organization, the system overview of the SNIPE mission, some project management tips on documentations and system requirements and traceability, our technical performance measure, a development schedule, as well as some highlights some of the issues and concerns that we faced and how we went about in solving them. So I'd like to start with the mission overview of the SNIPE. So SNIPE is an acronym for Small Scale Magnetospheric and Ionospheric Plasma Experiments, which is a set of experiments to study the scale and energy of electron microbursts, as well as temporal and spatial variations of trough and polar patches in plasma bubbles and blobs, along with field-aligned currents. So the SNIPE mission consists of 4 6U-sized CubeSats that are flying information in sun-synchronous low Earth orbit. So these are particular spacecraft. They actually have their name after Korean birds. I don't remember what they are, the Korean name for them. For each of the CubeSat, they have several subsystems, which includes the command data handling, the ACS subsystem, the propulsion subsystem, electrical power subsystem, as well as communication. And with each payload, there's numerous scientific instruments that are equipped with it, such as the Langmuir probe, solid state telescope, flux gate magnetometer, and a gamma ray measurement. For the mission organization, it consists of multi-international collaboration, in which CASI is the lead for this project. So under the project management with the systems engineer, and the systems engineering role is to overview all of the work being done for this mission. This includes the bus development, the payload, the mission operation, as well as some of the information flying algorithm. And on the side is a science steering committee, which dictates what is essentially the mission objectives. For the bus interface, working with CASI, which is a science institute, where I was essentially the engineering liaison for that team. The actual engineering part was actually done by CARI, which stands for the Korean Aerospace Research Institute, and in collaboration with Yonsei University, who took care of the formation flying algorithm. For the CASI mission team, the project manager, as well as the principal investigator for the SNIPE mission, is Dr. Jae-Jin Lee, who was my supervisor at the time. The lead system engineer was Dr. Jung-Ah Hwang, and where I was under her as on the side as me as a ACS subsystem engineer. So the CASI mission is actually involves local international collaboration between academia, government, and industry. It consisted of about 50 plus scientists. How we coordinate with each other is bi-weekly. We do it through teleconference, as well as actual meetings from different locations with different external organizations. Fortunately for us, CASI and CARI are neighbors, so it was easy for us to meet bi-weekly with all the teams present, and it was very productive. Whereas, for example, with Yonsei University, we'd have to do teleconference as they lived many hours away. Within the internal organization, we had some weekly development coordination. So we talk about the mission objectives, the science, as well as the mission. For the SNIPE mission, here is a system overview of the SNIPE mission. So the SNIPE mission is in 500 to 600 kilometer orbit with sun synchronous, with each of the spacecraft weighing about 12 kilograms, in which 8 kilograms reserved for the bus, and the others are such as the payload and other contingencies are within 4 kilograms. The design mission duration for the SNIPE mission is actually 6 months. This is our goal. If it lives this long and conducts all the experiments, it is success. It is a success. However, the engineering design is actually much longer than that, up to 1 year. It is equipped with 3-axis stabilization, and with its own power generation and all, etc. So for the mission success criteria, it is important to establish what is considered mission success and minimum success or full success. With each of the science targets, we verify each of the criteria and we give them a score. And essentially, minimum success, we want to achieve at least any of these three. And this would be very helpful for the space weather community. But nevertheless, we hope for full success. So for the bus architecture for each of the CASISAT, it is divided into two categories. One is the payload design and the bus design, where the bus has each of the subsystems under these different headings and equipped with different technologies. Here is an overview of the spacecraft subsystem configuration. Here you'll see the thruster, which is our propulsion system, and this is also where the science payload system, and this is the onboard computer electrical power subsystem, the attitude and orbit control system. And we have here, which is the communication subsystem, along with the GRM module, which is for the gamma ray burst measurements. For the stowed configuration, where it fits into a 6U size, and as you can see, upon deployment of the solar panels, it looks like this, with the antennas deployment and the solar panels deployed. For the scientific payload, it is the CASISAT is equipped with numerous scientific instruments, such as the Langmuir probe, which is actually attached to the solar panel. So upon the deployment of the solar panels, the mechanical connection will activate the Langmuir probe, as seen in this picture here. So it'll stick out like that. It'll just be a spring up, simple mechanical locking interface. So here we can see the solid state telescope, as well as some other scientific payload. Upon the launch early operation phase, this is the startup sequence for the SNIPE mission upon a jettison of the launch vehicle. So our main objective is to test to ensure all the systems are working before we go into the commissioning phase, such as, for example, deployment of antenna, as well as starting the beacon signal. And then upon verification of this activity, we start the detumbling control. Upon the satellite attitude stabilized, then we look into the sun acquisition and finally deploy the solar panel in which recharges the battery, and then we go into the commissioning phase. During its orbit around the Earth to study the atmosphere of the Earth, it performs different attitude maneuvers depending on where it is. For example, on the day side, it's all about recharging the battery, as well as ensuring the sun avoidance of different payload. Mid through it'll make some ground contacts. And finally, it'll also do some operation on the eclipse side. This is where it measures the field line current, as well as the SST operation. So between each of the mode transition, here in this picture shows you all the mode transition of the spacecraft, and how they transition with each. Normally from normal observation, throughout each orbit, the spacecraft changes to different modes autonomously. And this is just the structure of how the system modes. For between each of the maneuvers, we ensure to keep check on which components are on and off during each maneuver. So here in this table, we summarize here, for example, the circle represents the turn on, but not and use. So for example, the gyros, the MEMS gyros are used during D-spin, initial sun pointing, and ADCS initialization. And here the triangle is turn on but not used. And here an example, for example, the analog sun sensor is on but not used during the eclipse side. And lastly, we also have a turn off And here, an example here would be the magnetorquers, which are only used using the detumbling phase or momentum dumping. And aside from that, it is off throughout. Next, I'd like to talk about the formation flying of the SNIPE mission. So upon jettison of the 4 spacecraft, after the launch early operation phase of the mission, we go into the commissioning phase, where each of the spacecraft are jettisoned and free to separate. We expect this to happen within a month. And upon stabilization and secure, stable communication, we do the drift recovery formation. And then from that, we conduct our scientific maneuvers. Here is the orbit control scenario of the SNIPE mission. So here, upon jettison of the spacecraft, it'll spend many orbits just drifting apart. So as we can see, all the spacecraft are far apart. Upon stabilization, we actually work on the drift recovery. Then we do some station keeping afterwards to ensure we're ready for scientific measurement commissioning phase. And lastly, we go into the initial configuration of the cross-track for scientific observations. And that usually concludes our mission. But if it happens to survive longer, then we go into some reconfiguration. We just freely do measurements. So for the SNIPE mission, we adapt this particular documentation structure. Could you hold on 1 second, please? My apologies, my dog wants to talk to me. For the documentation structure of this mission, we start off with the system requirements definition, which outlines the higher level mission requirements. And then from there, we develop the system specification documents, which outlines all the requirements for each aspect of the mission, the ICD, which is the interface control document, as well as the concept of operations document. And with these 4 documents, we document all of the things involved in the SNIPE mission. As I mentioned, the SRD document establishes the higher level requirements of the SNIPE mission, and each of the components of the system specifications document outline the sub-level requirements for each aspect, such as the bus, the payload, formation flying requirements, the ground station requirements, as well as the launch vehicle. Okay. For the bus requirements, here's an example of an overview of the requirements. This is just a sample, one of many pages. Essentially, we see the higher level requirements of the mission, and then from here we define the subsystem level or system specification level requirements, and each is outlined thoroughly. And this is how we keep track of the scope. I mean, maintain the scope so that we can always verify if we are meeting our compliance or not. Here's an example of the payload requirements. We have the higher level requirements, such as payload power supporting, the direction of the scientific instrument, the energy range, and etc. And from there, we further refine them to system specifications documents, where it goes into particular detail to ensure the spacecraft meets those criteria. For formation flying requirements, similar. So again, here is a higher level requirements. And then from that, we break it down to actual system specifications. And lastly, for the launch vehicle requirements, here in blue, this was just actually updated a few months ago, since we finalized the contract with a launch service company. So the system requirements do change throughout the mission life, and they are always updated, but nevertheless, they don't update drastically. And that's where we keep track at each particular meeting, such as a PDR or CDR. We ensure that we maintain the scope to ensure that everything is within budget and compliant. So some of our technical performance for this mission includes the payload pointing accuracy requirements for the payloads, the power budget for the payloads, the communication budget for the mission data. Here, an example for the pointing performance measure, we ensure that based on the science target or science operation, we figure out what is our requirement, attitude control requirements for our payload. And then from there, we work backwards to ensure we meet those goals. And the pointing budget will definitely be consisting of these factors, such as the attitude determination error, filter error, sensor alignment, attitude control error, actuator error, etc. And here's an example of how the error pointing performance are calculated. And based on these particular parameters, we figure out our pointing performance for our system and ensure that the pointing requirements is met for, here's an example for thrust modes and also for scientific measurements. For data budget, we start out with the 1U CubeSat of the 6U, and we figure out what is the data budget for each of the spacecraft. And then from here, we add different components to ensure that the housekeeping data is in check. And from that, we also give some 20% allowance. And so we computed to about 221.4 megabits per day per spacecraft. And the beauty about the STAMP mission is we're using triple redundancy communication system. So we're actually utilizing the UHF uplink from CASI, as well as their S-band 7-meter antenna. And we're also on top of that, we are utilizing Iridium satellite network. And furthermore, we enlist NASA's collaboration to do some housekeeping checks for our system. Now, this was the reason for this triple redundancy plus international collaboration effort was because prior missions always failed based on the communication. So they really wanted to make sure the communication is not the problem this time. So hence the triple redundancy for that. Based on the transmission requirements, we figure out what is the S-band transmission time. And then from here, we figure out the optimal antenna configuration to meet such requirements. And based on the transmission speed, we can increase the if based on the stable communication, we can raise the operations from 1 megabits per second to 2 megabits per second. So here's an overview of the technical performance for the CASI payload. Here, for example, we have the solid state telescope, which is linked to the power budget and eclipse operation technical performances. And then from here, it is tied to the ACS subsystem. And here, for example, for formation flying, it is linked to the data budget consideration as well as thrust mode configuration. For the power budget for each of the spacecraft differed at each milestone. So for example, from systems review, the total expected power budget was around 22 watts. However, throughout the CDR, after more refinement, we have actually cut down to almost half. So, and based on that, and this is the overview of the power budget. Similarly for the mass, we targeted to about 12 kilograms, but over time, we optimized it to go about 8.5 kilograms. And I believe this will be, they're actually pushing it down to even lower than that. For the bus development schedule, I'm sorry, this is in Korean. This is the only Gantt chart that I was able to procure. However, essentially we actually start up with engineering qualification models. And so it started, this program actually started in 2017. with the first SSR. And throughout until the end of last year, we were actually finishing up on the engineering qualification model for all the tests. And we completed our CDR, where they started building the flight model for each one. Lastly, sometime next year is after producing the flight models, then we go into the health and safety review, and finally to the launch around 2021 Q2, Q3. This is our expectations. Similarly, for the payload development, this follows the same timeline as the bus development, partly because of that the two teams need to work together and to ensure consistent information. It follows the same schedule as the bus development. However, for the formation flying schedule, it is quite an outlier. So the software simulation was done. It's actually still in development in terms of the simulations. All that were previously conducted, and more tests to be done. Some of the critical design consideration we considered at the beginning was actually the change of the solar panel from body mounted to deployable solar panel. Based on our power budget, we found that the body mounted solar panel was not actually enough. So this is why they changed the critical design to a deployable solar panel. And some of the issues that were concerned, actually not until last year, we added a new scientific payload. So this kind of messed up with our scope a little bit, but it wasn't too drastic, and we were able to recover from that. So the addition of a new payload. So we had to ensure review of all the system to comply with this particular additional payload. As well as from before, our data budget has been cut down almost by 50%. And so these were some of the issues that we were facing. So some of our near-term activities for this year is more testing. Essentially, after having a contract with the launch service, so now we are looking for qualification for the launch vehicle. So we do a lot more tests, as well as the flight model integration and electrical test bench tests, as well as some functionality tests. Some of the lessons learned for this mission was to ensure we conduct a daily reset of the spacecraft, no radio frequency operation before separating from the deployer. These were some of the reliability lessons learned. Block the reaction wheel saturation. Full flat sat should be available. We know that actually the CubeSat's more difficult to design than larger satellites. There are more experience in CubeSat design than advanced technology, so these are things that we need to consider. And lastly, we don't enforce the low cost, fast manufacturing to ensure reliability. And that concludes my presentation on systems engineering of the SNIPE mission.
Thank you, Alex. We have a few minutes for questions, so maybe we'll limit it to 2 or 3. Anyone?
Sure.
There are so many. I might need some help in coordinating this.
Sure.
John has a question. How do I do this? Unmute the person, or can you unmute yourself and just ask? Josh has a question. Sorry, my bad. Josh, your blue hand is up.
I think you need to unmute him. Oh, okay. Oh.
Sorry, that was a mistake. I'm watching on my phone. I made a mistake. Sorry.
No problem.
I actually do have a quick question.
Sure.
So you said there's like 50+ people kind of involved in the project. I had a familiar experience with my capstone project where there's like many different people with inputs.
Mhm.
Were there any troubles like managing different expectations from different groups? Kind of like one group wants X, but the other group wants Y, and like there needs to be kind of like a middle ground somehow?
That's a good question. Actually, the system requirements document is what sort of like puts us all in the same page. So, but working with multi-collaboration, we need to be professional, and essentially we need to take the direction of the PI. Essentially, they make the decisions overall. So from my experience, there wasn't any really issues with that. Yeah, so.
Okay. Thank you.
No problem.
Thank you, Alex. If there's no other questions, I'm sure Alex will be available at the end of the workshop as well. So do ask him to stay and ask him privately. So
Sure.
Thank you once again. It's really hard to thank a speaker in a Zoom setting. So just consider ourselves just clapping, and you can just imagine that in your head now. There you go.
Okay.
There's some
No problem.
pretty yellow hands coming up. So thank
Okay.
you. I'd like to invite the second speaker, and maybe Amar to give a quick introduction.
Sure. Definitely, Regina. Hi, everyone. Our next speaker will be Judy. Judy is the research officer at the Faculty of Graduate Studies, and she's very kindly taken time out of her busy schedule to talk to us about developing successful grant proposals for a lot of the external awards, like the CGS, the SSHRC, and the Vanier. Without further ado, take it away, Judy.
Wait, before we do that, can I steal 2 minutes of everyone's time? Since not many of us have actually met you in person, why don't you introduce yourself as well?
Oh, sure. So I'm the new the TEPS coordinator. I took over for Anna just a couple of months ago. You're probably all getting a lot of emails from me, so I do apologize for that. But I hope we get a chance to get to know each other over the next little while, despite the situation that we're in.
Thank you. Sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt.
No,
Thanks,
no.
Judy. The floor is all yours.
All right, I just need a moment to set up. Can I just get some confirmation that everybody can see my shared screen?
Yeah, looks good.
We do.
Okay. Okay, so to begin, my name is Judy Tse, and I'm the research officer at the Faculty of Graduate Studies. You will only be seeing the side of my face because my work screen is here and then the camera's on the side. So my role at the Faculty of Graduate Studies is to support students in applying for scholarships and awards with external agencies, and as well to liaise between the external agencies and the institution as well as its students. So without further ado, the agenda for the 15 minutes I have is just, I'll spend 30 seconds talking about upcoming opportunities that may be of interest to you. I'll spend the bulk of my time talking about writing proposals or grant proposals, and then I'll share some resources with you. I've also provided Ahmad with a copy of this slide deck. So it may be, you may wish to ask Ahmad for it because you may want to just access the links easier. So just very quickly, there are quite a few funding opportunities for research-based programs at the graduate level. So we've got federal opportunities, which are the Tri-Council opportunities. And they have master's and doctoral levels. Master's starts at $17,000, $17,500, and it goes all the way up to about $50,000 a year for doctoral students. OGS, that's the provincial opportunity. It's $15,000 a year. And then part of the province's focus is to encourage research in science and technology. So we get additional funding for science and technology-based research. There are also a lot of awards in the FGS awards page. And I always tell students to keep an eye out for the FGS monthly newsletters because any impromptu funding opportunities will be shared there. So as mentioned, this is just a this is what I think is of interest to this group. So I believe that you guys are mostly undergraduate students and possibly some master's students. So this would be a good funding opportunity. It's a federal opportunity. And then the second opportunity that I mentioned was the OGS, which is $15,000 a year. And again, there is the additional allocation for science and technology research. So to begin our discussion about writing a winning proposal. So I will start with general tips first. Generally, you want to start early, super early. At first, you should be looking at the eligibility requirements and determining the documents that you need to compile for the scholarship opportunity, and prepare for a minimum of 2 weeks for any type of documents, such as reference letters and transcripts. Obviously, during the COVID world, the request for transcripts is going to be really challenging. I know a lot of institutions are responding to that. So you're going to need to be able to adapt to the changes that are to come, and the increased workload for the registrar's office to produce transcripts. So please plan ahead. And another general tip is to work with your referees. Generally speaking, more high-valued awards, you will need to submit references, and it is in your best interest to give your referees enough warning to write high-quality assessment letters on your behalf. It is also in your best interest to share those research proposals and any documents that you have with your referees so that they can speak more fulsomely on your behalf. It's not ideal for your referees to be kind of working in the blind. So please work with them, and please start working with them early. Another tip I would offer is that anticipate technical issues this year. Year over year, we're seeing a higher increase in all types of scholarship applications, and with that, we're seeing a lot of technical issues come up. So just as an example, we've seen websites crash for applications for awards, and that causes panic all around. So I always tell students to submit applications for high-valued awards maybe a day or two early to prevent any issue, and just to commit to the proposal, right? Commit to applying for grants and proposals, because it makes your research possible for some people, and it's also really high valued, so treat it like a job. So I definitely encourage students to use this time before classes begin to kind of get all your business in order for you to have a more seamless experience when you're applying for awards. So generally speaking, the documents that you would be required to compile and produce are a research statement, or we call it different things: a research statement, research proposal, grant application. But essentially, it is a research statement. Generally speaking, there are 1 or 2 pages. At the master's level, it's usually 1 page. Start talking to your referees about reference letters, start compiling your transcripts. Normally they want to see all undergraduate and graduate records. And I mean all, whether or not it took place within York or outside of York. Think about preparing an educational background document, such as your curriculum vitae. And consider building on any research contributions and kind of having an idea of what they're looking for, so that you can kind of fill in research contributions throughout the year if you do not have research contributions right this second. On to writing your research statement. So before students begin writing the research statement, I always encourage that they ask a couple of major questions or overarching questions. So for the social sciences areas of research, we always ask them to ask, what are you writing, and why are you writing it, and who are you writing it for? But for science and technology-based programs, a lot of times we're asking the questions, how can I solve an existing problem? And if I have a solution or I have a proposal to develop research in a known problem, what kind of impact will any research contribution add to the existing problem? So you want to make sure that when reviewers read your application, you want to persuade them into believing and understanding that your research plan is significant, that it's solid, that it's worthy of funding. And of course, to do that within view of any evaluation criteria they share with you, right? Your research statement should be clear. It should be engaging and intelligible to a non-specialist reader. So when we say this, obviously we expect any reviewer to have a wide array of experience in the field that you're in. However, they may not be an expert in the exact type of research that you're doing. So it does need to have a readability. It needs to be applicable and readable and understandable to a group of faculty members, a group of professors, a group of reviewers, not just understandable to your direct supervisor. So that's just something to think about. Obviously, they are informed and they're all experienced, but they may not be specialists in a type of, one chemical or one type of laser. So that's just something to think about. Also consider review panels. So review panels are usually made up of several faculty members. It is not uncommon for each application to be reviewed by 3 or 4 different people, making up a panel or a committee. So you want to make sure that again, it has wide readability because multiple people will be reviewing it. And you do need to make sure that you explain the importance of your research from the outset in order for the people to continue reading the proposal, because sometimes there are many, many files to review. So let's go over the components of a research statement. It's similar to writing an essay, but I would say that it's more polished for the purpose of winning grants. So your introduction should also be your background, right? You should also be posing your research questions. It needs to be engaging, it needs to be clear, because it is essentially your thesis paragraph, right? You would need to want to justify and clarify your objectives in your research. You want to talk about why is your proposal important. If there's a gap in knowledge, how do you anticipate to fill that knowledge gap? And what type of impact will filling that knowledge gap produce, right? A lot of reviewers oftentimes are looking for what the impact of the research is to justify the funding. And then also they want to know its impact with whether or not the impact is going to be within academia, within a community of subject matter experts, or whether it will have a broader impact throughout the world. So answering those questions will help signal to the reviewers how important your research is. Literature review is quite straightforward. Research method, I'm just looking at the time here. So moving on to research method. When we talk about a research method, it's kind of tied to your academic program. So if you're applying for funding to fund your master's level study and your master's program is 2 years long, they want to see a methodology that is realistic within that time period. So you do want to be realistic when it comes to methodology. And it does need to line up with the research question that you're asking. So make sure there is that consistency and that alignment. Moving on to the conclusions and the contributions, note that it's tied, right? The contribution piece and the conclusion piece is tied together, because not only are you concluding your research statement, but you're also closing by hammering in the impact that you propose that your research will have, and why the research matters and why it's worthy of funding. To summarize, you want to be able to have the reviewers be able to kind of articulate in a very short period of time your what, your where, your why, your how, and the impact of your research, the so what of your research. And it should be very easily articulated by your reviewer. Otherwise, they may not perceive it as highly. So, closing thoughts. If 2020 has taught us anything, the advice is to plan ahead. A lot of funders are still formulating a plan on how students should be submitting transcripts in light of the fact that a lot of institutions are unable to provide transcripts. So definitely plan ahead. Also, if you expect reviewers to be able to articulate the importance of your research, you should be able to. So you should in your head be working on your own elevator pitch, your own abstract, how to condense your research in a few, maybe 2 or 3 sentences to kind of see see whether your research statement is being articulated clearly. Thirdly, I would say find readers. So as mentioned, you want to make sure your proposal has readability across different disciplines. So find people to read your proposal and ask for feedback and see what kind of questions they have when they finish reading it. I think that it's really smart to find peers in your group, your classmates, to read the proposal for you. Obviously, your supervisor, any mentors you may have, and even not people outside of academia, just to read it and just to say, this part doesn't make sense here, or is this relevant? Is this important? Does the review committee need to know this piece? So that's a good idea. And also, it's good to kind of show your passion for the subject area and be a little possibly emotive around why this research is important to you, because what this shows the reviewers is that you are the best person to do this kind of research, that you are a good candidate to be studying this research area. Finally, I want to share with you some supports that FGS has for students like yourself. So we are doing information sessions for students that wish to apply for the following award opportunities. We will have a couple in September, a couple in October, and in fact, we'll also have NSERC. NSERC is the federal agency that funds research for science, technology, and engineering research. And they will be co-hosting a session with the Faculty of Graduate Studies on September 16th. The time has yet to be confirmed, but it's really nice to have program officers from Ottawa hosting sessions in institutions. So we always encourage students to attend. So if you're interested, there's a registration link, and we will share registration information as soon as it's available. Finally, some more resources that I'd like to share with you. We have a guide for students to self-study or self-review when they're working on their research proposals. We also have a guide for, we also have a guide for referees. So this guide is a guide that you can supply the people that you would like to ask to write reference letters on your behalf. And it will guide them on how to write a strong reference letter on your behalf. A lot of times in major competitions, students cannot see what the referees write. So it's just a good piece of, a good resource to share with referees. Also, NSERC has created a YouTube video, it's just a few minutes long, about how to make an application stand out. And Here is the contact information of the scholarship and awards team at the Faculty of Graduate Studies. And if you have questions, we'll be happy to help. So yeah, that concludes my presentation. Again, I've already shared this slide deck with Ahmad, and you can request it from him again because the links are just easier to access. I'm going to stop screen sharing now. I think this concludes my time, Ahmad. So thank you so much, everybody, for listening. I do not think I have time for questions, but I do hope you hold on to them and contact the Scholarships and Awards team and or Ahmad for any questions that may arise. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.
Cool. So as Judy said, she wasn't able to really take any questions, but for those of you that do have questions, feel free to, you can even email them to me at teps@yorku.ca, and I can always send them all to Judy. And then when she responds back with her answers, I can then just circulate them to everybody. Up next, we have from Innovation York, we have Rachel Sung. Rachel's the MITACS Business Development Specialist. Yeah, take it away, Rachel.
Thanks, Ahmad. I'm just gonna share my screen here. Okay. Can I just get confirmation that I'm sharing okay and you can hear me?
Yep, all good.
Perfect, thanks. So thanks so much for inviting me in to speak today. So my name is Rachel Sung and I'm the MITACS Business Development Specialist for York University. And today I just wanted to take a chance to speak to you guys more about MITACS and some of the funding opportunities we have for graduate students and postdocs. So for those of you who haven't heard of us before, MITACS is a national non-for-profit organization that provides funding and support to foster growth and innovation across Canada and internationally as well. Our goal is really to develop the next generation of researchers and innovators to develop a knowledge and innovation-based economy in Canada. And through our programs, we help to connect industry partners and post-secondary institutions to come together to develop and work on collaborative research projects that help to solve technical, business, and societal challenges and problems. At MITACS, partnerships are a really big key to our success. So we are an international research network and we've supported over 20,000 research projects in the past 20 years. We have partnerships with over 60 academic institutions and over 6,000 Canadian companies. We partner with a number of different stakeholders, including the federal and provincial governments, post-secondary institutions, companies, and research networks as well. So really the main objectives and goals of our programs is to provide funding and support for students to engage in experiential learning opportunities. In our programs, we support projects across all disciplines, so all the way from sciences, engineering to social sciences and humanities as well. Some of the benefits to you as students in engaging the MITACS programs is really to get that experiential learning and training opportunity through working on these collaborative research projects. It's also a great chance for you to enhance and expose your education and knowledge. And our programs have a really high application success rate, so it's a great chance for you to obtain some extra funding and diversify your funding sources as well. So the three programs I'm going to be focusing on speaking about today include the Accelerate, Elevate, and Global Link programs. So I'm going to start off with Accelerate, which is the MITACS flagship program. The Accelerate program is mainly to support projects between academia and companies, as well as non-for-profits and municipalities. So municipalities is a new feature that we've added in this year. The program is open now to undergraduates as well, including graduate students and postdocs. And again, we're open to all academic disciplines. The program has a rolling deadline, so you can apply anytime that you would like, depending on when you would like to start the project. Some key features about the Accelerate program, we support small scale projects all the way to multi-year, multi-million-dollar projects as well. As I mentioned before, we have a really high application success rate. With Accelerate, on average, it's over 95%, and I can tell you all the applications I've submitted at York have been successful. So it's close to 100% success rate at this point. We have a really quick and easy application process, and it takes around 6 to 8 weeks for approval once you submit the application into MITACS. We get this question a lot as to whether our programs are eligible for international students, and the answer is yes. So the program is open to both domestic and international students. In terms of the structure of the program, it's structured into 4 to 6 month blocks. So the shortest project you can do is 4 to 6 months, but you can build it up to a longer term multi-year project if you want using these 4 to 6 month blocks. And so the program is structured like an internship. So it is required for the student to spend some time working with the company directly on the project. So in normal situations, we did require students to go physically to the company's office to work on the research project. But obviously during the COVID situation, we've waived that to be virtual interaction for now. In terms of funding, how it works, it's basically $15,000 for every 4 to 6 months, with half of that coming from the partner and half coming from MITACS. So MITACS is a 1-to-1 matching for the partner contribution. So if you were a master's, PhD, or postdoc student, you can actually get MITACS accelerated funding to support the entire duration of your degree, and we have limits as to how many 4 to 6 month units you can do, which is listed here. We also have a couple of different flavors of Accelerate. So for example, we have the Accelerate Entrepreneur Program, which is for students that have their own startup company and which are housed in an incubator. So for example, for York, one of the eligible incubators is Y-Space, which is located up in downtown Markham. And this is a chance for students who want to do research and act as an intern for their company, so they can be both company and intern on the research project. So that is a exciting new program that we've launched. We can also work with international companies, so companies that are outside of Canada, which would be under the Accelerate International stream. So the funding and structure of the program is exactly the same as normal Accelerate. It's just that, again, with normal situations, we would require the student to spend time abroad at the company working on the research project. And obviously in COVID situation, we've all waived that to be virtual interaction for now. So the next program I'm going to be speaking about is Elevate. So Elevate is actually for postdocs. So for those of you who are considering postdoctoral training in the future, this program might be of interest to you. So it is a 2-year postdoctoral fellowship. Again, it's for projects with industry partners, so either a company, non-for-profit, or municipality. And it's a 2-year fellowship. We typically have 2 deadlines per year for this program, usually one around mid-July and then another one around mid-February. Again, open to all academic disciplines. In terms of funding, how it works is it's $60,000 per year for 2 years, with half of that coming from the partner and half coming from MITACS. What makes Elevate a little bit different from Accelerate and what also makes it competitive is not only the more generous stipend you can receive through the Elevate program, but also because Elevate has a special training program built into the fellowship as well. So this is a series of online and in-person, if the COVID situation comes around, in-person courses that you take that focuses mostly on soft skills. So it focuses on these 3 core main areas, and these courses are scattered throughout the 2-year fellowship, and you'll be taking them with the other postdocs in your same cohort as well. So this is a great chance for you to get some networking and interact with other postdocs as well. So I thought I'd give you some examples of some Earth and Space Science engineering projects we've had coming through York in the past. So I've here have a range of weather network, including not-for-profits and also smaller companies, as well as a medium-sized company as well. So these are some of the projects that have come through York in the past. If you want to find more examples and more details, you can feel free to visit our past projects page, which is linked down below. On there, we list out all of our projects that we've supported in the past, so feel free to have a look through there. If you are actively looking for an internship and want to look for companies to work with you on a project, you can also visit our open projects page, which is also linked below. And on there, we have companies that have approached MITACS and are interested in recruiting students for their projects. So that's a great starting point if you're looking for a partner to work on an internship with as well. And finally, the last program I want to touch upon is Global Link. So Global Link is a little bit different from Accelerate and Elevate in that it is to foster international collaborations between Canadian universities and international universities. So for the Global Link programs, you do not need a company or non-for-profit partner. So it's purely between university and university. So at MITACS for the Global Link programs, we have specific international countries that we work with where we can send Canadian students abroad, but also bring international students into Canada as well. So we have two programs that cover the bilateral motion of the Global Link program. So the first one is the Global Link Research Internships, which is basically to bring international senior undergraduates and master's students into Canada. So this is more for faculty members who are interested in hosting an international student over the summer in their lab to work on a research project. The funding is approximately $12,000 depending on where the student is coming from, and all of that will be going directly to the student. So the main goal of this program is really to recruit top talent international students into Canada and hopefully have them stay in Canada for graduate school as well. So we do have a follow-up fellowship that these international students can apply to for additional funding if they decide to stay in Canada. For those that are in Canadian institutions and want to go abroad to a university outside of Canada, we have a program for that as well, which is called the Global Link Research Award. So this is for a 12 to 24 week project. The value is $6,000 during that duration. Again, open to senior undergraduates, graduate students, and postdoctoral fellows. So we do have a list of specific countries you can travel to, which is available on our website. And again, the program is rolling deadline, so you can apply anytime you want. We do have a limited number of these available, so if you are interested, please let me know and I can see if we can allocate one of the quotas towards your project. And finally, the last thing I'll touch upon is the training that MITACS offers. So MITACS offers free online soft skills training for graduate students and postdocs. So I highly recommend you to take advantage of these while you're still a student, and it covers a large number of topics, including project management, relationship building, entrepreneurship, etc. And all you have to do is just create an account on the MITACS online training platform, and you can access all our courses on there. So that's pretty much it from me. I know that was a lot of programs, so feel free to reach out to me if you have any questions, and if you want to chat about which program would be the best fit for you, I'm happy to set up a call to discuss that. But thank you so much for your attention for now, and I'm happy to take any questions.
Thank you, Rachel. We probably don't have a lot of time for questions, but do you mind sharing your slides with us? Maybe we can post it on the TEPS website or even distribute it by email if that's okay with you.
Sure, no problem. I'll send it over to Ahmad for distribution.
Perfect. Thank you.
Thanks.
Thank you, both Rachel and Judy. I mean, that has been very, very informative information, and I'm sure we are very excited to learn all about those training opportunities as well as the granting opportunities. The TEPS program is here to support our students to achieve a lot more than just a degree, so we are really happy to be part of all these discussions. Next hour, we have very, very special 3 speakers, and then I really want to say thank you to all our faculty members and the students who have said yes to participate today. But do keep in mind that these 3 speakers were exactly where you are today, not too long ago. So feel free to ask them all the questions you have in mind. The only instruction I gave them is to talk about their experience. That's it. I didn't really ask them to prepare any slides on technical topics or any specific advice. So they are really free to talk about whatever they choose to talk about. This will be more of a question and answer period. With that in mind, I'm gonna just introduce each of them, and I will ask each of you to maybe just speak a little bit about your personal experience and what you're currently doing so that the rest of the attending audience can formulate the questions as you go through them. Why don't we start with you, Alicia? Catherine, you said you can make a quick introduction for Alicia. Would that be okay?
Yeah, you don't have to introduce yourself, Alyssa. Let's do it. So Alyssa was a master's student in my lab from 2016 to 2018, participating in the TEPS program her final year. She came with a lot of experience in planetary science and a degree in geophysics from SUNY Geneseo, and works with some labs at NASA in between graduation and coming to Western. While at Western, We worked together looking at the composition of impact craters on Titan, which is Saturn's largest moon. And after graduation, she got a job for Malin Space Science Systems, which is located in San Diego, California. So now she's an image targeting specialist, helping to take pictures of Mars with all the current cameras we have there. Alyssa, feel free to add anything if I missed anything, but we're really happy to have you today.
Thanks. Nope, that sounds sums it up pretty good. So hi everyone. As Catherine said, my name is Alyssa. So I'm just gonna go ahead and share my screen now. All right. So everybody can see that good, hopefully. Okay. Oops, sorry.
Oh, that looks good. It looked good there for a second.
Okay, yep, I just had to click something else. All right, so as Regina said, this is more about giving you guys more information about what opportunities are out there and what our experience as former TEPS trainees actually was. So I want to first start off with what exactly my job entails and what this company does. I think it's important to give you guys basically a better sense of what jobs are actually out there in the field. And then I will give some advice that I have for those of you that are thinking about looking at a career in planetary science. So I currently live in San Diego, California, and I work for a very small company called Malin Space Science Systems, or MS3. So this was founded by Dr. Mike Malin, primarily because he wanted to build and provide cameras for spacecraft. So this image here is of Jupiter, and it was taken by one of the cameras built at MS3. So this was taken by JunoCam. So we make cameras for NASA missions, but also for smaller private space companies. This is another example of a camera that was built at MS3. So this is the ever popular Molly selfie of the Curiosity rover. So we actually built the Molly camera. And as this company has evolved over time, we not only build this hardware, but we also operate this hardware as well. So the process of commanding the sequence to take this image and process this image and stitch it all together was actually done by some of my coworkers. And that gives you this image that we see here. And I just want to point out our website. So we have msss.com. So if you guys want more information about what exactly we do, so these are our main pillars. So here we have our cameras. If you're an engineer and you want more information about what hardware we build, that type of thing, feel free to click here. We also have our operations pillar, so how we operate some of the hardware on the spacecraft as well as on Mars. And then this third pillar here is the science group. That's what I'm a part of, and I'll give you guys more information about that. But as a little side note here, if you guys are thinking about careers and you like what this company does, if you're an engineer, you're a scientist, in this About Us section, we post jobs and it's updated frequently. So you can check there. All right. So for my job, I work on this with the spacecraft called the Mars Reconnaissance Orbiter, or MRO. So I'm a scientist on this mission. So we have multiple instruments on board. There are ranging from optical cameras to spectrometers to subsurface radar instruments. But the two that I want to point out are context camera, CTX. This is the instrument that I work with specifically. And we also have MARSI. So this is the weather instrument. So these two were actually built at the company that I work for. So my job, more specifically, as Catherine mentioned, I am a CTX image targeting specialist. So CTX, as I said, it's onboard MRO, it's orbiting Mars, and essentially I get to decide where on Mars to take images of, based on what the scientific merit is of taking those images. So this camera images Mars at an unprecedented resolution. It's 6 meters per pixel. That's incredible for another body in our solar system. And the main objective of this camera is actually in the name. It's to obtain context images for higher resolution cameras such as HiRISE and Prism. And this image here is actually an image of CTX at MSQ before we send it off to JPL. So before I can begin selecting where to image on Mars, JPL first has to provide us with the data on where exactly the spacecraft is going to be. So once we know that information, I can look at where we can reach along this orbit here. So what regions are of scientific merit. We also have the ability to roll the spacecraft. So if I'm interested in taking an image just off the orbit, we can command the spacecraft to roll and actually go over there, take an image, and then go back to the orbit. So these rolls are actually important for something called stereo, which I'm going to talk about very briefly in a couple slides. But once we have all this information from JPL, we know where exactly the spacecraft is going to be, and we are then evaluating the science portion of it. So we first have to pay very close attention to the weather. So I'm sure you guys are well aware, Mars is very, very dusty. So we don't really want to command all these instruments, and then when we get them all back, it's just dust. That kind of defeats the whole purpose of the mission. We want to get surface images. So on the left here, we have a very poor weather image of Gale Crater. On the right, we have the same exact image, but with crystal clear weather. You have very well-defined surface features, and you can't see any on this left image. So as a targeting specialist, you have to be very aware of the weather, and we get MARCI data daily, so we can check that, but we also rely on our general knowledge of Mars seasonal trends. So some places are just dustier at a certain time of year. So we keep that in mind when we're selecting our targets. So I mentioned that the main objective of CTX is to provide context to other cameras, but we also have our own internal scientific objectives. So for instance, we have a lot of monitoring sites. So for instance, here, this is a seasonal monitoring site, but we also have things such as impact monitoring or landing site monitoring. So here, as these images flip through, you can see that the colors change. It's getting darker, and then it's getting lighter. So this is basically just showing you a defrosting and the frosting of these sand dunes on the South Pole. So another science objective that we look at when we take these images, we tend to come across a lot of fresh impacts. So here in the CTX image, we came across this dark blast zone, and we actually get to coordinate with HiRISE. So we reach out to them, we say, hey, we think we found a new impact. Would you guys follow up and take a higher resolution image? So here, this is the HiRISE image, much greater resolution. It's about 1 meter per pixel. So it actually, you can see 3 specific impacts here, which we could not see with CTX. But more importantly, and I think a little bit cooler, this white region here is actually exposed subsurface ice. So we tend to reach out to them a lot when we see cool impacts, and they can follow up with that. So another science objective a targeting specialist has is to make stereo. So I briefly mentioned earlier, we have the ability to roll the spacecraft. So this is important for stereo. So stereo is essentially a digital elevation model of 2 images on top of each other. So one image usually is when the spacecraft is pointing straight down, and then the other one is usually when the spacecraft is rolling, so it's at a different angle. And these different angles are what we get our elevation data from. So this here is a modified stereo mosaic of Gale Crater. Stereo is important not only for research scientists, but also for scientists and engineers that are assessing the hazards of landing sites or rover traverses. So this is where, as I said, Curiosity rover lives. All right, so in summary, my job, CTX image targeting specialist, as I said, the main objective of this camera is to provide context, but we also have our own internal scientific objectives. So we have these monitoring sites, we look for stereo. In these images, we also find a lot of new impacts, and we follow up with this. And we also assess and monitor current and future landing sites. So for instance, Mars 2020, we're taking a lot of images of Jezero Crater before the rover actually makes it there, and of course, after, once it hopefully successfully lands and gets to live out its life there. All right, so now I am going to transition more towards the advice portion. So now that you guys have like a good idea of what exactly I do, I want to tell you guys how I got there. So I know obviously this is not going to be the same for everyone, but I think it's good to get a general idea of what someone else's path was who was once in your shoes. So as Catherine said, I graduated in August 2018. I earned my master's degree. And immediately after that, I decided that I wanted to take a year off. So for a full year, I traveled and I didn't work any job relating to the planetary science field. In August 2019, I ended up emailing Catherine, my advisor, and I gave her some life updates, basically telling her that, hey, I'm actually ready, I'm starting to look for a job in the field. And luckily for me, she happened to just come across a job that she thought was perfect for me, that I was well suited for. So she sent it along my way. I took a look at it and I ended up applying. And then 2 months later, I got a phone interview. A month after that, they flew me out for a second interview. December, they gave me an offer, and January I started. So it took about 5 months of this hiring process. I think, in my experience, that seems to be relatively fast. A lot of my friends, it's taking a lot longer, especially now with COVID. So everybody is different, but this is just for your guys' information, this is what it was for me. And so for my main takeaways, so this, if you take nothing from this talk, just please take this slide away. This is my general advice that I wish I had when I was in your shoes. So number one, it's okay to take a year off. When I was graduating, my parents like drilled in me that, no, it's not okay to take a year off. You're not going to be able to get a job if you take a year off. But I'm here to tell you that is not the case. I have a job. It's possible. You can take a year off. So if you're thinking about taking a year off, do it. It shouldn't hinder you in getting a job. My second bit of advice is to network. So if I hadn't reached out to Catherine, if Catherine and I didn't have a good relationship, she probably wouldn't have seen that job posting and thought of me. So this is something that I think TEPS has helped me with. So when I go to conferences, when I first started going to conferences, I wasn't really one of those people that would just go up to someone and start talking to them, start building those relationships. But I think as you're exposed to it more and more, it gets a lot easier and you're more comfortable. You're exposed to a lot more people and backgrounds. So it TEPS with the workshops, obviously now they're all virtual, but you still get to experience all these talks and all these backgrounds. So definitely network. You never know how it's going to help you down the line or vice versa, how you can help someone else. Third, definitely apply for everything. So I actually didn't fully meet my job's requirements. One of the requirements that they were looking for is that the applicants were comfortable on command line and that they were good computer programmers. And I am here to say that I am a beginner with computer programming. I still kind of am, but I made that clear in my interview that I don't meet that requirement and it was okay and I still got the job. So even if you don't think that you're fully qualified, apply for it. You never know. And finally, do your research before the interview. So for my phone interview, I actually had 4 pieces of paper surrounding me. One with questions that I wanted to ask the interviewer, another one that had information about the company, and then 2 other sheets of paper that were like bullet points to answers to questions that I thought that they were going to ask me. So if I froze up on the phone interview, I would be able to reference that sheet of paper. So I think it was good to just prepare for that. And then for the second interview, so most importantly, the main part of my second interview, I had to give a 45-minute scientific presentation. So this is where TEPS, again, helped me greatly. For the workshops, as I'm sure you guys are well aware, you have to give a scientific presentation and talk about your research. You have to be able to answer questions about it. So 2017, TEPS, I went to Montreal. I gave a presentation on my master's research. I met a bunch of different trainees. There were postdocs. There were people with established careers. So I got all different types of questions. It's just being exposed to that more and more often. You get a lot more comfortable. And then you never know, all these little things that TEPS is doing, it adds up down the line. And I think it definitely helps you when you're looking for a job. So that was just my general advice. But if you guys have more specific questions, please definitely ask me. I will open it up to questions. But thank you for having me. And like I said, definitely ask me questions. I was in your shoes. I know exactly what you guys are going through when you're looking for jobs. So thank you guys. And now I will take some questions.
Wait, before we do that, thank you, Alicia. Thank you so much. That was really interesting. I really hope you can share the slides with the rest of the group as well. Do you mind staying for a little bit? Because I really would like to hear from all three speakers and then have three of you as a panel where we can just ask all questions, if that's okay with you. If you have to leave at 3 o'clock sharp, then maybe we'll reverse the order. But if not, then John, just kindly agree to moderate those Q&A periods, which I'm sure all three of you can answer to more or less the same questions. Would that be okay?
Yep, that's good with me.
Perfect. Thank you. Why don't you move over to Brittney? Is she around? There are so many names on the screen that I can't tell. Oh, there she is.
Yes, I'm here. And I think I have the same background as Alyssa.
Great choice.
Or similar.
John, do you want to start with a quick introduction?
Absolutely. So it's my pleasure today to introduce you to Brittney Cooper. She's a former undergraduate TEPS fellow and former master's TEPS fellow, specializing in planetary atmospheric science. And that was both on Titan and Mars, but from her background, I think we can tell where her true allegiance lies. In my lab, she served on the Mars Science Lab, that's the Curiosity rover mission, as an environmental science theme lead and a keeper of the plan. And just before she finished, she did a TEPS internship as well. That was down at NASA's Jet Propulsion Laboratory in Pasadena, California. Over her year with the lab, she published 3 papers, and there's a 4th that was just submitted based on all that work. So she has a very strong record academically as well. And these days, she is an assistant science operations specialist at the Gemini Observatory in Hilo, Hawaii. So Brittney, great to see you. Take it away.
Thanks. Thanks for that really nice introduction, John. I can't tell if I'm showing the right screen. Is this the right screen? Or did I just move everything away?
Yeah, I think we're seeing your background there.
Okay.
It's a lovely background, though.
Now is this, this is good?
Yep, I see the PowerPoint.
Okay, awesome. All right. Yeah, my name is Brittney, and last September I defended my master's for Master of Science in Earth and Space Science. And as John mentioned, I'm currently an SOS at Gemini. And I was just asked to talk about my journey from academic to non-academic life. And I think I only have about like 10 minutes worth of talking. So I gave a lot of time for question and answer. So hopefully that can help with the timing for that for all of us after. So, all right, a little bit of backstory. So I personally took a bit of an indirect path to end up in science. I took a few detours straight out of high school before I started my Bachelor of Science in Astronomy and Atmospheric Science. But only a few years later out of high school, I was on that track. And once on that track, it was not without its struggles. I definitely struggled with having enough focus. I wanted to say yes to everything and get involved in everything, but ultimately that became really difficult to balance with my academics. So later on in my undergrad, I eventually found my footing. I learned it was okay to say no to certain things and to prioritize my academics. And that helped me to, by the end of my undergrad, become more focused and deeply involved in Professor Moore's lab, doing some really awesome research and getting to be a science collaborator on MSL, or Curiosity rover. And so after my, towards the end of my undergrad, I was offered the opportunity to go on to grad school, which is not something that I had originally planned on, but that opportunity contained the potential to continue on with the really cool research, which was my favorite part of school, and to keep working in a lab with my friends and my peers and under a great mentor, and not to mention stay on MSL. So I said yes to that, and it was a great decision, but I was not able to think about committing after that to another 4 years of school for a PhD, and still to this day, it is a bit, it's a bit daunting. So I knew that was not the path for me, so I had to figure out after that master's, what was I going to do? And hands-on experience is a great way to learn what you like and what you don't. Luckily for me, it helped me see what I liked. So getting to do mission operations on MSL, as John mentioned, I got to be an EMV science theme lead, and I got to do some other roles as well. That was a total childhood dream of mine, and it never really seemed like a realistic one, so I never took it seriously. But then getting to do that work showed me just how much I not only enjoyed that type of work and the fact that I wasn't half bad at it, but the fact that it seemed attainable. Here were all these people that actually do this for their job, so why couldn't I? And so that helped me take it more seriously and decide to pursue that after my master's. And part of that was getting to do an international internship as a TEPS trainee. So I got to do that, as John mentioned, at NASA JPL in California last summer for 2 months, which was really awesome. Would highly recommend. It involved working on a new science project and getting to gain in-person experience in operations, because up until then it had all been remote at York. And then thirdly, it gave me the opportunity to pick the brains of people that were in this field, in space operations that I wanted to get into. The really nice thing at JPL is they everyone prepares for and gets ready for a horde of interns to come every summer. So people are very willing to indulge us and meet for coffee or lunch to just talk. So I kind of wanted to meet as many people as I could in the field to see, what can I do to get where you are? What's the way that I can make it? And as cheesy and as obvious as it may seem, yeah, I found there was no one way to make it. Because it's such a diverse and multidisciplinary field, a lot of people had widely ranging stories and backstories and paths that they took to get where they were, whether it was very focused and direct from the beginning, or whether they took a lot of detours to get where they ended up. What was universal for everyone was that they all seemed to highlight and be very proud of the path that they took, and note the skills and experiences that really made them the perfect person for the role that they were in. So that was very motivating to learn. So looking for opportunities beyond academia. As we all know, it's a lot of work to hunt for jobs at any level, and applying for school or grants, it's the same thing. Having to tailor all your applications for each specific opportunity and trying to sell yourself can be very uncomfortable for a lot of us. Additionally, trying to sound professional in a cover letter or email, but also trying to impart some personality so you don't sound like a robot. All these things make it very time-consuming and brutal. I personally, towards the end of my master's, I would say maybe 9 months before the end of my master's, started looking online for jobs. And in this field that I wanted to get into, which is space science operations, a lot of the roles are in the US, and whether they're institutional or private companies, there's some barriers for people who aren't American citizens because a lot of it falls under defense. So that made it difficult. But I applied online to about 30-something jobs. And similar to what Alyssa said, I applied to some where I may not have met all of the qualifications, but it was also difficult, struggling with imposter syndrome, which a lot of us struggle with because you're like, there's no way I'm ever getting this, why even bother? But you have to push through. And in the end, I heard back from only 2 for interviews. Both were at observatories in Hawaii, and ultimately one said yes. So there's that kind of cliche that you only need one to say yes. But in my case, that cliche was very true. But then you have to say yes to that offer. So I personally did not expect to get that offer. I had an interview in January. I'd applied in January. I did an interview in April. And then a week later, I got offered the job to move to Hawaii, a place I'd never been before. And I was very overwhelmed. I suddenly had to make all these decisions and determine if not only myself, but my long-term partner wanted to come with me. And if he did, then we would have to get married in the next week and decide all of these things within the next week so that he could come with a visa. So seeking the advice of advisors, friends, and family was super helpful, but it can also add to the confusion of all the things going on in your head. So pro and con lists, also very helpful in organizing those thoughts and making a sort of loose plan for where you want to be professionally and personally in 5 years and 10 years can help you see if this opportunity that you have aligns with that. So for me, it ultimately came down to just taking the opportunity that was presented to me and knowing that if it didn't work out, it would be fine. It wouldn't be the end of the world. It would be very inconvenient, yes, but it would just be another experience and it would be okay. So I said yes. And then in September of 2019, I defended my master's at York. And then a few weeks later, moved to Hawaii with my husband and started my job as an assistant SOS at Gemini. So that's what I'm doing now. And this role is really cool. It's not a typical telescope operator role. At Gemini, we have about 4 elements for the SOS. 2 of those are nighttime roles. So there's telescope operation, which is more like systems engineering, doing the engineering roles, fault troubleshooting. And then there's nighttime Q observing, which is very similar to science planning on space missions, where you're dealing with different time and weather and other constraints to try and jam pack as much science as you can into a small period of time. And then I have also daytime operations, which is the role that I'm doing this week, and that will start for me in about a half hour. So that involves instrument calibration, data checking, and we also do mask design and cutting for our multi-object spectrometer. And the 4th element is project time, which is a lot more like research, except you can't do research. So it's a project, one or many of your choosing, and it's basically however you want to contribute. You can do science outreach in the community. You can be a part of a diversity and inclusion panel. You can do software maintenance, build and develop scripts that maybe one day will eventually take our jobs. Systems engineering, learn more in-depth things about certain faults that plague us day to day. So it's however you want to spend that time that you're allotted and however you want to develop yourself, which is a really nice element of this job. So it's been a year now since I've been a student, almost a year, and that's kind of crazy, but I know that this was the right decision for me. I'm in a job that's in my field that is exciting and there's room to grow. And I also have more time now than I did to explore and take up old hobbies. And that's not to say that in academia you don't always have time for that, but for me, I found it a struggle to assert certain balance in life. And so it's a bit easier on a job that you can clock in and clock out of. And so that's not to say that I don't really miss being a part of my lab or the lab that I was a part of back at York and being a part of MSL. But I do feel that, yeah, this was the right choice for me, and I would highly recommend it if you're not sure. There's a lot less risk involved in kind of deviating off the path for a bit just to see if you like it, and then coming back if you don't to commit to a longer term PhD or something like that down the line. So that's everything I have, and I'm happy to take questions now, or we can push it later, depending upon what the chair of this meeting thinks is best.
Just a little bit. Thank you so much, Brittney. That was really awesome. The pictures are just amazing. And I'm sure everybody has lots and lots of questions, but I just want to take a few more minutes to hear from Sam as well. And then we'll be all asking questions to all 3 of you simultaneously, if that's okay with you. I also want to point out that the program is relatively young, and yet it's so exciting to see so many students coming back already to talk about their current career and their experience as well. Sam, are you available? I don't see you either. As I said, oh, there you are. Okay. It is really with great pleasure that I introduce you as an MDA engineer rather than a master's student, because less than a year ago, you're on the other side presenting yet again about your master's thesis. So Sam finished his master's less than a year ago. As part of the TEPS master's students, he also did an internship with Magellan, wasn't it, in Ottawa? So to go from York to Magellan in Ottawa, then now back to MDA, I think you've covered fairly large number of projects as well as different experience. It's really good to see you. And I'm really hoping that we can do this in person in near future. But since we are running a little behind the schedule, I'm gonna keep my introduction short and just hand it over to you.
Okay, thank you very much. I will share my screen. And does that work? Everybody can see that?
Yes.
So just a bit about myself. I did both of my degrees at York University. I did my Bachelor's of Engineering in Space Engineering at York, and I finished that in 2017. And then right after that, in September of 2017, I started my Master's of Science with Regina, working in Regina's lab. And I did that for 2 years. And then just last September, I started full-time as an intermediate MTS, which just stands for Member of Technical Staff, in the System Design Department at MDA. And so I've been there for just about a year now. So I'm just going to talk about my experience through my master's and then some of the work that I'm doing at MDA now. I'll just chat about that for a bit, and then we can take any questions after that. A bit about my thesis that I worked on as a master's student in Regina's lab. I was looking at space situational awareness and the feasibility of using commercial off-the-shelf star trackers for detection of space debris and resident space objects. So my work consisted of developing a couple of simulators in MATLAB, one to predict the effectiveness of them. So it would just simulate orbits and whatever objects you put in there, and it would estimate how many objects you might see with a given camera in a given orbit around Earth with different characteristics, how many objects you might see, just to assess the feasibility of using these cameras, whether or not they were sensitive enough to actually pick up space debris, or if you were only going to see a couple of objects every year in a given orbit, then it would not be worth it to actually pursue this. And the other simulator was to generate star tracker images for algorithm development. As Regina mentioned, I worked with Magellan Aerospace on this. And so some of the images there on the right, I don't know how easy it is to actually see what's going on there, but some simulated images of the Earth and stars, which Magellan Aerospace was then able to use to test some of their algorithm and develop those. Just a quick summary of my path to MDA. So as I mentioned, I started my Master's of Science in 2017 with Regina, and then in March of 2018, I started an internship with Magellan Aerospace in Ottawa, and so I was working on my thesis with them. So I was able to work. It was good to work with an industry partner and get experience working with them. I think I spent about 4 months over that summer in the office with them. So I got just experience working in the industry. Like I was in academia working on my master's and my thesis, but I was able to do that with Magellan Aerospace, which was a great opportunity. I worked with some great people that helped me out a lot. I also had the opportunity to present at a couple of different conferences. Regina told me when I started, before I graduated, I had to present at a national conference and an international conference, and she made sure I did that. So in May of 2018, I presented at the CASI conference that was in Quebec City, I think. And then in 2018, I also had the fantastic opportunity of going to the Amos Tech conference in Hawaii and presenting my research there, which was just a really great opportunity, again, to be exposed to the industry and different people in academia. It was a space situational awareness conference, but it was dominated by the United States Air Force, which was really interesting to get a different perspective. In Canada, working in the space situational awareness field, we were mostly looking at, okay, you have space debris, we're throwing all this stuff around the Earth, and it's getting really, really crowded up there. So how do we prevent collisions? We don't want to accidentally run into stuff. But then the Air Force's perspective was, we want to know where everything is up there so that we can make sure people don't attack us, and so that we can attack other people if we need to. So it was really interesting getting a different perspective, moving from well, what I perceived was a mainly Canadian perspective to then what the Air Force, the United States Air Force, thought. So that was a great opportunity as well. And then in May of 2019, I was working on writing my thesis, and I'd done the bulk of my research. And so I was working on just writing my thesis, and I started a TEPS internship at MDA, which is one of TEPS has lots of internship opportunities, and that was a great experience for me. It didn't have anything to do with my thesis, but it was just an opportunity for 4 months over the summer to go and work at MDA and kind of see what was going on there and what sort of work they were doing. So I did that for 4 months over the summer. In June, I defended my thesis, and then after I finished my internship with MDA, they hired me full-time in September of 2019. And so I'm just coming up on a year now of full-time work there. So just to summarize, I was able to pick up a lot of practical experience and tools through my master's and working with Regina. Working with an industry partner was a great opportunity, just to kind of get exposure to that, and to get, like, I got connections through them and was able to, I worked with Magellan Aerospace, but they also had connections with DRDC in Ottawa. So I had lots of people that I could go to for help and advice as I was working on my thesis. And then I also had good exposure at national and international conferences, just again to kind of see what's going on in the world around me in my field. And one of the biggest things for me was a TEPS internship at my future employer, which is a great opportunity that TEPS has and offers to TEPS trainees. And so similar, some of these thoughts have been stated by Alyssa and Brittney already, but just one of the things I realized that there's no one path to a certain destination. For me, a couple of my friends, so we all did our Bachelor's of Engineering at York in the same program. And then we all, from there, took different paths, but we all ended up working at MDA. So I did a Master's at York. One friend just went straight to MDA from his Bachelor's, and another friend did a Master's at U of T. And then we took different paths, and we all kind of ended up in similar places working at a similar company. So there's not always a right or wrong choice in the path that you're taking, but you can end up in a specific place taking lots of different paths, and that's okay. And then, especially this last year working at MDA, it's just been a constant learning experience for me, kind of getting thrown into stuff that I'm not always prepared for or have experience in, but just being able to take advantage of the smart people around me. MDA, I found, is there's great people there. There are really smart people there, and they're more than willing to help me out and to teach, whether I'm just curious about what they're working on, or they're able to help me on stuff that I'm working on. And it's been like that through my path so far, even working in Regina's lab, being exposed to people in her lab and outside of the lab, fellow students and stuff that have been able to just help me grow and teach me has been a great experience. And then obviously taking advantage of TEPS internships for me has been huge. Not everybody does that, but for me that was a huge advantage. So I'll just talk a little bit about what I've been able to do at MDA. One of the projects I've got to work on is called SVMS, Space Vision Marker System. And so this is it's a vision system that they're developing for different applications, different customers. Essentially what it is you can see the picture of it down in the bottom right of the slide. It's a retroreflective target for determining the position and orientation of different objects for robotic operations. So given a camera, so when you know the size of the target is it has a black base, and then it's that white strip with the different squares around it, and then it has a post in the middle that's sticking out a couple of inches. And so given the dimensions of that, you can take images of it with a camera, and then you can figure out where your camera is relative to the target. So whatever your robotic operation is, you're able to figure out the pose and orientation to do different robotic operations. And MDA is largely a robotic, space robotic company. So I've been able to develop different tests for characterizing the target. I did that for a significant part of my internship, and then I've been able to kind of help out with that project still as I've been working full time. So measuring the reflectivity of the target to determine, okay, when we throw this thing up in orbit and we have different lighting conditions, is it actually going to work? So the target's designed to be retroreflective, meaning light that hits the target is going to come straight back out in the direction that it came from. So the image up there has different types of reflection. So retroreflection is where the light comes in at the target and then comes right back out in the direction that it came from. And the idea behind that is to, if you have the sun somewhere behind you reflecting off the target, rather than the sun just hitting the target and then blinding your camera, basically, a lot of that light will be rejected by the target. And then they have an LED ring around the camera. So then basically you're only, with the images that you're taking, you're only getting the light that you're putting into it. So hopefully everything else, that's all the other light that's coming in, is being rejected, and you just have your LEDs in your camera working together. So I've been able to work on different tests for that, testing different illumination conditions. They have what's called a sun gun or a solar simulator, which is like a big flashlight basically that simulates the solar spectrum and intensity. So I've been able to do some cool testing with that in the lab. And they're developing it for a couple of different projects, for a NASA project and then an independent company. So it's a product they're hoping to sell, but I've been able to work on that, and that's been really cool. They've used some of the testing that I did for defining the requirements for the system for a couple of the missions they're using. So that's been a really cool experience. And the other project that I've been working on is called LWCM, or Laser Warning and Countermeasure. And it's part of it's called the Canadian Surface Combatant Ship Project of the Canadian Navy. So the Navy's developing and building, I think it's 15 of these new ships that look something like what's in that image. And so MDA has been contracted to develop a laser warning and countermeasure system to mainly detect laser guided missiles. So you have bad guys on the shore near the ship, and they shoot a laser at your ship, and then the missile follows the laser in and hits your ship to blow it up. And so we've been contracted to develop a counter defense against that, which has been really cool, working on something like that and working on something for the Navy. So I've been able to do some phase A system level design and modeling, so failure modes and fault tree analysis, stuff like that, which isn't particularly exciting. But I've also been able to work with, we have different cameras and lasers and stuff like that, and I've been able to work with some of the integration and testing of those systems. We're just kind of moving from the preliminary phases and breadboarding into prototyping, so it's going to start to take shape in the next year or so, which will be cool to see it come together. So I've been able to kind of develop some simple software to control these things and start having them work together, and we've been doing some testing and stuff like that. So that's been a great learning experience for myself, working with cameras and lasers and software that I'd never really done before. So that's been a really cool project that I've been able to work on as well. Yeah, so it's been a great experience being able to work at MDA. It's a great environment. There's a ton of really smart people there, and I've been able to learn a ton, and it's been a constant learning experience for me. So that's more or less the path that I've taken from grad school through TEPS and now to where I am now. And it's just been filled with great opportunities, and I had a fantastic supervisor through my master's, which is probably the best piece of advice I could give you, is to find a great supervisor, and they provide a lot of help and support. And so where I am now is I owe a lot to Regina for everything that she did for me. But this has been my path so far.
Oh, thank you. We didn't rehearse that, but thank you.
No, she didn't pay me to say that.
Maybe I should. But John, floor is yours. Maybe you can moderate the Q&A period.
Happy to do so, Regina. So I think the floor is now open to questions for Alyssa, Brittney, and Sam. So we'll do this as a panel, and you can address your question to the entire panel or to a particular speaker if you like. As with all of these wonderful Zoom meetings, we've got some options down there under the participants panel. So if you'd like to ask a question, I ask that you raise that blue hand that you have an option for on the right, and I'll call you out. If you would like to have a question answered through the chat, you can also type it in there, and I'll happily read it out if we exhaust the number of blue hands. So don't be shy. We've got some great speakers with some great experience. I'm sure we can learn a lot from them. So please go ahead. All right. Looks like our first question is from Akash. Go ahead.
Hi. So what is one soft skill each of you have learned during grad school that you still now use at work?
You said that we don't use at work?
That you do use at work.
Okay. Just checking.
So I don't know if I actually know what a soft skill is, but I would say communication. I think that's a soft skill. Definitely communication, verbally, writing. I have to communicate with my science team members. We each have to be on the same page. I think that's important really in any job down the line.
Brittney?
I feel like I'm in the same boat here. I think if I could remember off the top of my head what other soft skills are, I could maybe pull one of those out. But yes, communication definitely is key in my role, because part of my job is liaising, especially as day operations, between the scientists and the summit crew that goes up to do the engineering work. So yeah, communication is key when you're working with very expensive equipment.
I think for myself, I can echo that. Communication skills, so being able to, presenting my research at different TEPS workshops and also at different national and international conferences, picking up communication skills there. I think also, like graduate school, I think you develop like kind of independence, working on your research. You're supposed to sort of like take that on as your own. And I think that kind of that ability, I think I've been able to use at work, where I'm able to be given a task, and I don't have to be babysat, but I'm given a task, and then I can kind of run with that and take it over and accomplish that without having to be constantly supervised, which I think is a benefit, or I hope is a benefit at least.
Thanks, everyone. Before I go into the next question, I just like to ask something related. So all three of you mentioned the value of networking. So now that you're out in the working world, I'll ask you a leading question here. Is the end of networking, nigh, or is that still a very important skill, do you find?
I guess I'll start again. I would definitely say very, very important. So as a science group member, I really only knew my core science group, but as I got more comfortable into my position, I ended up like branching outward, meeting those operations people, networking with them. I wanted to learn more about that branch of things. So networking with them, I was actually able to get the ball rolling, and I'm actually now transitioning to some operations roles. So I'm able to do two things. So yes, definitely networking still helps.
I think more and more we're getting away from that idea of you start one job out of school and you work in that job till you die. A lot more we are, excited by new opportunities as they come along. A lot of roles are temporary, and there's a lot of companies out there that are open to that and encourage that, so that it keeps people excited and for the future and motivated, and it allows people to grow. So whether that's like, networking within your current company or institution or outside of that, I think people more and more are looking for ways to never stop learning and growing.
I think there's the other side of networking as well, where which applies to all of us, not just us three on this panel, but like as we get older and get more experience and kind of shift into more and more roles, there's people coming up behind us that I think we have the responsibility to network with. As we have been coming up, there's people above us that we network with that help us along, and then we also have that responsibility to network with people, whatever stage we're at, whether we're working in industry or PhD, master's, undergrad. There's people behind us that can always use a hand, and we have the ability to network with and help along as well.
Good points, everyone. Regina, I think you're the next questioner.
I'm not sure if I'm allowed to ask questions, but I was just curious.
Oh,
One of the beautiful things about TEPS is that we bring in engineers and scientists together, which is not a common occurrence. I mean, as my students first entered a group like this, we all scratch our head going, what are we doing in this group? And yet I really see that as the strength. Listening to three of you who are slowly going from science to engineering, then engineering into more science, do you see that as the strength, or how can we do better in terms of bringing two groups together so that we all speak the same language? Not that we don't speak the same language right now, but do better.
I think a lot of big projects do involve scientists and engineers, but there's a divide in language and culture. And so, yeah, starting earlier on when you're in school can definitely help bridge that gap and build mutual respect and admiration and help working together going forward.
Alyssa or Sam?
Yeah, I think there's an importance in cultivating these two and having them kind of work together. One without the other doesn't really make sense. They both help and build off of each other. And it's this cycle where engineering helps science and science helps engineering, and it grows. So the specifics of how that's actually done is, I think, is a big question and one that TEPS is seeking to work on and answer. But yeah, I think that's an important thing.
I see much nodding and a thumbs up from Alyssa there. All right, we have another question, this one from the chat. So if you still do programming, what programming language do you use?
All right, so I didn't work too much with programming in grad school. I just knew the basics of command line. But now I use command line. It's basically whatever we are most comfortable with. So some people I work with use Python. I use command line in C Shell. So really whatever you're comfortable with for my specific job.
In my role at Gemini, we are currently undergoing a project to update all of our scripts into Python 3, and I learned MATLAB at school, so it's good to learn, although I wish that we could be still working in MATLAB, but it's good to learn and branch out, so that's what I'm learning more of now, and we also use Bash as well in the command line.
For me, so in the last year, I've done a ton of C++. I've done more software than I thought I would ever do. I hated it in school, but I've ended up using it a lot. I've done a lot of C++. In my internship with MDA last summer, I used some C#. I know people at MDA, like I think Fortran is still used. Python is popular. It depends on what what your specific role or task is at that time and what works best, and also what other people previously have done, and you kind of build off of that. But like I still use MATLAB every now and then, but just the different, with the work that I've been doing, C++ has been what I've used mostly, which I had never used before. I just picked it up since I started in the last year.
All right, I'm not seeing any other questions in the chat. If there's any other live questions, please don't be shy about raising the blue hand. We've got Peter, please go ahead.
Just had a quick question about just the kind of location in general, because I know so like some of you, like a lot of you kind of like moved around a lot, and I was also kind of interested in moving myself, and I was kind of wondering like what kind of factors you considered when in terms of like moving long distance, like to the States or Hawaii, which is really cool.
I can start that, I guess. So for me, there's a lot of paperwork involved after I made the decision, which was not fun, but the hardest part in making the choice was I never lived anywhere than, you know, the general area that I grew up. So it was a big decision in knowing, like, you know, how will it feel to leave everyone I've ever known, except for my husband, which is who's coming with me. And the biggest factor in making that move was it being in a partnership, and, you know, I'm not only uprooting my life, but we're making the choice together to uproot our lives. So that was a big decision. And we had to make it in a relatively short amount of time. But then there's also research on where you're going. What's the culture like? What's the weather like? All those kinds of things. And do you see it as long-term or short-term? For me, this job was not a contract position. So sometimes if you're offered a contract position, that makes it a bit easier because you know, okay, like, you know, in X amount of years, if I'm not enjoying this, I can just move on. But yeah, so I think the biggest things are kind of more personal elements when you're learning to, or when you're choosing to move somewhere else.
For me, it was the complete opposite of what Brittney said. It was more so professional. So it's different for everyone. So I always said, to be completely blunt, that I never want to live in California. And what do you know? I'm in California now. So basically, I made my decision on will I be able to get another opportunity such as this. I've moved away several different times throughout my life. I haven't been near my family in a while, so I was pretty used to that, opposite of Brittney. So I think that made that a little bit easier. And I also planned on traveling home often, but obviously not the case now, so it's a little bit different. But yeah, completely different answer from Brittney. I said mine was more so on professional decisions, if I was able to get another opportunity as great as this. So different for everyone.
I probably have the least to offer with this question. I moved the least distance. I went from York University in North York, just north of Toronto, to Brampton, which is just west of Toronto. When I did get the job offer from MDA, I also had an offer from Telesat in Ottawa. So it was basically a choice between kind of 4 hours north to Ottawa or like an hour west to Brampton. Which some of the factors that for me personally played into it was the relationship that I'm in. Moving 4 hours puts, I wasn't married like Brittney, so that puts a 4 hour long distance strain on the relationship. So location factored into that. So it was great that I was able to find a place close to where I already was. So I didn't have to uproot myself like Brittney did.
Thank you.
Thanks. And thanks everyone in the panel for those answers. Checking one more time. Is there anyone who'd like to ask a question? Well, seeing none, and that we're just a smidge over time now, I'd like to thank our panelists, Alyssa, Brittney, and Sam. And the way that I've been doing this in Zoom meetings, because I've unfortunately been doing a lot of these, is I'd like to invite everyone in the room to unmute your microphones for a minute, and let's applaud our panelists and also Alex from earlier, as well as Judy and Rachel. I know they're still not on or they've left the call, but this is a recorded talk and will be available to people later on. So let's thank all of our speakers. All right, well, I think that brings our panel to a close. I'll turn it back over to our master ceremonies, Regina, to take us home.
Thank you. This was really awesome. I do want to echo John's message of thank you to all the speakers as well as the audience and faculty members for attending the session. I really wish I could have done this in person, but it's not to cancel the workshop this year, but to just simply delay it, and hopefully we'll have another opportunity to meet and greet everyone. So thank you once again. The slides will be available on the website as well as the recorded the video, and do let us know if you have any specific questions. Again, thank you, and hopefully we'll see you at the next seminar. Bye, everyone.
Bye all.